Switch gears, and we're going to jump into our message this morning, and we're going to kind of pick up a little bit where we left off last week. And I want to start this way. I want to say, you know what we're talking about today, there's a component of it, there's this word that we're going to be talking about, and I think it's actually one of the ugliest words in the entire English language. What we're talking about today, that's how I feel about it. I think it's one of the ugliest words in the English language. Now, some of you, you're trying to figure out what I'm thinking, and you're thinking profanities. I can't say that on stage, okay? So eliminate that and track with me for just a second, because what I'm thinking about, the word we're talking about today, it is something that probably isn't going to come to mind first, second, third, probably not even in the top 25 for you as you think about what's an ugly word that we're going to talk about at church. But the word we're going to talk about is this, and I think it's one of the ugliest words in the English language. It's this word ungrateful. And here's why I think this is one of the ugliest words in the entire English language, is it's because no one wants that, right? No one wants that word associated with their name. No one says, yeah, I'm ungrateful. No one wants someone else to call them ungrateful. And what's interesting about this word ungrateful is it's one of the most difficult things for you and I to see in our own lives. We know when we're mad, we know when we're frustrated, we know when we're upset, we know when we're insecure, we know when we're afraid. But ungrateful, we don't know that one. We don't intuitively understand when we're being ungrateful. In fact, if as an adult someone's ever called you ungrateful, this is something, how many parents are in the room, right? A lot of parents. This is something we say to our kids, right? I have almost a 3 and almost a 5-year-old, and I say to them, not all the time, but like, you're being ungrateful. Look at everything you have. Like, that's what we say to our kids. But as adults, that's not something we say to one another very often. But if someone's ever called you ungrateful as an adult, what's your response to that? How do you process that? What do you do? Oh yeah, you're right. Thanks for telling me. Really appreciate it. Not a chance, right? You're like, whoa, you don't know me. Right? Don't come at me with ungrateful talk. Like, you don't know who I am, right? And we start to tell them all the reasons they're wrong. That's how this whole process works. We get defensive. And what's amazing about this is if someone says to you, hey, you're ungrateful, we get defensive, we tell them they're wrong, and then what starts to happen is this. They tell us we're ungrateful, and then we begin to think of all the things in our life that we're grateful for, right? And as we think about all the things we're grateful for, our mind literally goes from an ungrateful place to a grateful place, rendering us no longer ungrateful, which means they're wrong, okay? You picking up what I'm putting down right now? This is one of the reasons that ungrateful is so hard to see in our lives. Because we can convince ourselves that we're grateful. When someone says, hey, you kind of exploded there. You were a little mad. You're like, yeah, I was. You're right. Hey, you're ungrateful. No, I'm not. Like, don't come at me like that. And I was thinking about it yesterday as I was preparing a little bit, and I was thinking about, in a crowd this big, inevitably, there were people in this room who, when you came in this morning and you sat down next to somebody, you're like, man, I'm glad he's here. Or I'm glad she's here, right? And I can't speak to the ladies, but guys, I know you, right? I know you woke up this morning, and single guys, you were getting ready this morning, you were doing your thing, you were making sure you look good, got your hair good, and you walked in here and you're like, man, I hope she's here. And then you saw and you're like, yes, today is a good day, right? And then you didn't want to be too creepy, but you wanted to be close, so you kind of set like a row and like a person over, but you're like, hey, how you doing right there? Greeting time. Hey, girl, what's happening? I know you. I see you, okay? But this happens. We start to think like, oh man, I'm glad that happened. Or some of you, now that you know we're talking about gratefulness or ingratitude, you're thinking, man, I wish my spouse was here. Or I wish my parents were here. Or I wish that other person, fill in the blank, was here. It's really ironic that some of you, you're a couple and you're sitting next to your spouse right now and you're thinking, I'm really glad they're here, and you're thinking the same thing about the other person. But it's because ingratitude, being ungrateful, is incredibly difficult to see in your own life. We can see it in other people, but in our own lives, it's really difficult for us to see. If you were here last week, Brad finished up in Colossians 3:17. And that puts us this week at Colossians 3:18. And what happens in Colossians 3:18 is it really switches gears into talking about husbands and wives and loving and submitting and children loving your parents. And it takes a different, it goes in a different direction a little bit. And that's where we set to go this morning. But as Brad and I talked this week, and as we kind of processed through this, we realized that there's this reoccurring theme that happens at the end of Colossians 3. And so what we're going to do this morning is we're going to look at three of the verses that Brad landed with last week, but we're going to look at them a little bit differently. And so we're going to unpack that in just a moment. And as we enter the holiday season, this is the time of year where we begin to think grateful, right? That's what happens during this season. We round the corner, Thanksgiving this Thursday, Christmas not too far away, and we think more about gratitude and thankfulness now than any other time in the year. And the question I want to pose to us this morning is, what would our lives look like if instead of being grateful a couple times a year during this season, that we were grateful people all year round? What would be different? And so I'm going to look at Colossians 3:15 through 17. It says this. It says, "And let the peace of Christ," if you have your Bibles, if not, it'll be up on the screen. "And let the peace of Christ rule in your heart, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." In those three verses, Paul mentions thankfulness, or depending on your Bible translation, gratitude 3 times. Verse 15, "And be thankful." Verse 16, "And with thankfulness in your hearts." And verse 17, "Giving thanks to God the Father." And it 'tis the season, right? But what would happen if we were more grateful people all year around? Not just now. Not just as we enter Thanksgiving and Christmas. Because what I believe is you'd be happier. You'd be physically healthier. You'd be emotionally healthier. You'd be relationally healthier. You'd be all around better off, more rested people. We would be that if we were more grateful. And it may be a dramatic departure from what we've believed to be true about being healthy, physically and emotionally, because really what we tend to think is, if I'm going to be healthy, I need to go to the gym, right? I need to go to the gym and I need to work out. I need to lift weights, or I need to get up early and I need to go run before I go to work, or I need to do CrossFit, or I need to do this, or I need to eat healthy. I need to do these things. I need to stand in front of that mirror and lift really hard and look at my muscles. That's what I need to do, right? You're laughing because it's true. People do that, right? And we think these things, these are the things I need to do to be healthy, which those are true. Those are great things. I'm not saying those aren't good things. But what if we could become healthier people without just doing those things? What if there was another way? Because there's a connection between gratitude and our health that actually goes back a really long way. It goes back hundreds of years. Thousands of years. There's thousands of years of literature, Christian and non-Christian alike, that talks about the benefits of cultivating gratefulness as a virtue. And so I spent some time earlier this week, and I just begin to research this idea of gratitude as it relates to our health, emotional and physical, and all these other pieces of our health. And as I researched, I found credible source after credible source. Just for the record, just because it's in Google doesn't mean it's credible, so I didn't just go Google search and go, hey, this sounds good. That's not how this works. But I found credible source after credible source and neurological study after neurological study citing gratitude as a main player, as a main factor in our happiness, in our health, in our physical and emotional health, in our stress levels, in our relationships, and even our spiritual health. And according to some of this research, I'm just going to share a little bit of it with you. I'm not going to go super deep into it, but according to some of this research, there are a couple of things gratitude uncertainly does, or without doubt it does. Gratitude helps us alleviate stress. It's proven that gratitude helps us alleviate stress. And it's no secret, for you and I, that we get stressed out when things get busy and hard and difficult, and what happens is we get so stressed out, and if we can't cope with it, we begin to literally get sick, right? We begin to feel sick and get wore down, and stress can do that to our bodies. Gratitude, it turns out, can help us manage stress. And so this Thanksgiving, after you go eat turkey, and what you convince yourself is I'm tired and relaxed because of the tryptophan in the turkey, which is a myth, that's not real. But when you tell yourself, hey, I'm relaxed and I'm going to go take a nap because I ate turkey, that's not really the case. What it is truly you are thankful on that day. You begin to process the things you're thankful for on Thanksgiving. It relaxes you, it takes the stress out, and you can calm down. That's a real thing. Gratitude alleviates stress. Another thing gratitude does is gratitude literally can boost your immune system. And I know that sounds crazy, but grateful people actually, it's proven, have stronger, better immune systems than those who are ungrateful. Grateful people, there's a component of this where they have to be optimistic, right? Optimism and gratefulness, they kind of go hand in hand. The grateful pessimists, they don't really fit so much together. But research indicates that grateful optimism boosts your immune system. In one study that I read, research compared the immune systems of first-year law students who were grateful and who were optimistic against their pessimistic classmates. And what it showed is those optimistic first-year students maintained a higher number of blood cells that protects the immune system than their pessimistic classmates. It had nothing to do with family history, these things. It was literally, they were more optimistic and grateful, and it helped them physically. And as I read that this week, I'm constantly calling my wife the eternal optimist like that. I'm like, stop being so optimistic. She's onto something, right? It appears she's onto something. God bless you. Gratitude can help alleviate stress. Gratitude can literally boost your immune system, but it doesn't just stop with the physical. The benefits of gratitude go far beyond that. Gratitude has been tied to helping people process loss and tragedy in their life better than those who are ungrateful. People who are grateful, people who are more optimistic, are able to process loss and tragedy and difficult situations in their life when they arise better than those who aren't. Why? How does gratitude help us deal with tragedy and loss? Here's how. Those of us who are grateful and we're optimistic, when tragedy, when difficult times hit, rather than focusing on what's not well and what's not good, we're able to look at what we have and what is good. And it helps us process and deal with that. For grateful people, tough and even tragic circumstances are easier processed because it allows us to see the good in our lives. It allows us to look and see that God is at work and that it's not all bad. And as I read this week, I thought to myself, this is great stuff. Like, reading the research alone makes me want to be a more grateful person. I want to have less stress. I want to have a better immune system. I want to be able to handle difficult situations when they arise in my life. But what if I told you that that's not the most important benefit? That's not the largest benefit of gratitude in our life. What if I told you that there's far more to the story? What if I told you gratitude is actually a spiritual stimulant in your lives, in our lives? I have this ritual, this daily ritual that I engage in, and I've been doing it for years, and I do this ritual, and I know millions of Americans across the U.S. do the same ritual every single morning. And what happens is I wake up every morning, and I go to my kitchen, and I fill that magical steel machine on my countertop with dark ground coffee beans, and I fill it up, and something amazing happens, right? those dark coffee beans, when they combine with the perfect amount of hot water, makes this elixir that just makes my day better. Okay, anybody else in this boat with me, right? Okay, this is like, it happens every single day. And nowadays, it's actually far easier, right? If you have a Keurig, you just like stumble in there, you open the Keurig, put the K-cup in, close it, push the button. This is perfect. Okay, you don't have to wait. It's just there. But we do this thing every single morning. You come into here and you don't come into service until you get your cup of coffee. Your spouse is like, worship's starting. Get off me. I need my coffee. We're going to go worship in a minute, right? Why do we do it? Why do we do this? Why is this part of our routine? Because you're addicts when it comes to coffee, right? Okay, that's really part of it, okay? We laugh, I'm addicted to coffee. Many of us are addicted to coffee. That's a real thing. But why is this part of our routine? And whether we admit it or not, in such basic terms, coffee is a stimulant. Coffee is a stimulant. It gets us going. It helps us wake up in the morning. It picks us up. It raises the intensity in our day and in our morning. For some of you, it raises it too high, but it raises the intensity, right? Gratitude is a spiritual stimulant. Gratitude is a spiritual stimulant for you and I. When we're thankful people, when we live with awareness of what God has done and how God is working, and we see with intense clarity how our lives are blessed by Him, it literally helps us focus and stimulates us spiritually. It tunes us into what really matters in life, and it boosts us spiritually. I think most of us, when we start thinking about gratitude, we probably wouldn't verbalize this, but it's easy to go there in our minds and begin to think, if I had more, I would be more grateful, right? There's just this tie that kind of happens. Like, if I had some more stuff, and if I had a little bit more money and these cars and this and that, whatever it is, if I had a little bit more, I would be more grateful. That's not necessarily true, right? We know that's not true, but we tend to think that way sometimes. According to a psychology professor at the University of Illinois, he studied extensively this idea of satisfaction from people across various cultures. And what his studies showed at the bottom line was that it doesn't matter how much you have, it's not tied to how grateful you are, right? The people who have more are not more grateful people. That's basically what he boiled it down to. He said as he studied the rich, as he studied the middle class, as he studied the poor, what he found was that the people who were most grateful in life were those people right in the middle. That's what it says. He actually looked up a group of multimillionaires from the Forbes 400 list, and he talked with a portion of these guys, and what he found was it didn't matter how much money or how much stuff these guys had or these ladies had, they were no more grateful than just the average Joe. And one of the most interesting things, the thing that stood out most to me from his study is that of all the people in the world that he surveyed, that he studied, that there is one place in the world, one group of people that across the board were statistically happier and more grateful people. And it was people in Ireland, okay? It was people in Ireland of all places, but when you think about it, people in Ireland, what do they boast about? They boast about the luck of the Irish, right? They boast about a count your blessings culture. They boast about four-leaf clovers, all this stuff. That's a real thing, right? They were literally more grateful, happier people. So the basis of gratitude is not whether you have or you don't have. Instead, what this is getting to is that gratitude's in you. Gratitude's in you and I. It's about our perspective and our framework as we look at the world around us. It's about how we react and interact in our relationships. If you have your Bibles, you can switch over to Luke 17. If not, it'll be up on the screen. I want to look at a story in the life of Jesus as we kind of continue to unpack this a little bit. And it's a great story. Many of you probably heard this story, but I think it has the potential to really impact our perspectives and our feelings on gratitude. And so it says this in Luke 17. I'm going to start in verse 11. It says, on the way to Jerusalem, he was passing between, he being Jesus, was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers. Okay, these are men with leprosy. Okay, you've probably heard this before. 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voice, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Now, if you know anything about culture during this day and age, if you've looked into it, heard about it before, that leprosy was known to be an incredibly terrible disease. During this time, there was no cure for leprosy. People who had leprosy were seen as outcasts. They were literally asked to leave the city they lived in and go live on the outskirts, either by themselves or in these colonies of people with leprosy who were like them. They were outcasts. They were alone. And what would happen is people from the city would take food to a drop-off point, leave it for these people with leprosy so they could go get food, eat it, and leave, or eat it and go about and stay healthy. But they were outcast. They were away from their friends. They were away from their family. They couldn't have a job. They couldn't interact the way they did previous with really anybody except for people with leprosy. They were seen as ceremonial unclean, which meant that they couldn't engage in temple worship, so how they worship God had to completely change. They were destined to live alone, or they were destined to live with other people with leprosy. And so here's Jesus walking basically along the border of Samaria and Galilee, and these 10 men yell out to Jesus. And they yell because they knew we can't approach this guy. There was a law that said if you have leprosy, you can't just go up and approach people because you were that contagious. And so they yell to Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Jesus looks, he sees the guys, and here's what he says. He says, when he saw them, he said to them, go show yourself to the priest. So, Master, have mercy on us. Go show yourself to the priest. What? So no? Like, Jesus, I just asked you to heal me, and now you're telling me to go show myself to the priest. Like, what are you saying to me? Like, if you don't want to help me, just tell me you don't want to help me. I don't quite understand what you're telling me to do. I want you to heal me. It's a funny way that Jesus responds, right? Jesus, heal me. Go show yourself to the priest. But what we have to understand is that Jesus responds this way because in Old Testament law, if you were a person with leprosy and you were thought to have been cured from leprosy, so you had leprosy, all of a sudden it's gone, you think you're cured, in order to integrate back into normal culture, you had to go see the priest, and the priest had to say, you are now healthy, you no longer have leprosy, welcome back. That's how you got back in. And so Jesus tells these men, 10 men with leprosy, go show yourself to the priest. And they're like, show him what? Like, go show him our leprosy? Like, yeah, everybody knows we have leprosy, thanks. Like, what are you asking us to do? But I think Jesus was asking these 10 men to do something that he asked you and I to do pretty regularly. And I think Jesus was asking these 10 men, when he said, go show yourself to the priest, I think he was asking these 10 men to walk by faith. Right? Walk by faith, that means that you believe God has asked you to do something and you're going to do it even if it doesn't make sense to you, right? I don't understand why you're asking me to do this, God, but I know you've asked me, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen. I'm going to follow. I'm going to obey. And so Jesus asked these men, go show yourself to the priest. He says, you think you know who I am. You called me master. If you think you know who I am, if you believe I am who you think I am, then go show yourself to the priest. And I think in that moment, Jesus knew that what was going to happen was these 10 men with leprosy were going to go show themselves to the priest, and the priest was going to go, what just happened? Where did you come from? Because what would happen is one person with leprosy goes to the priest and they go, hey, I'm healed, check me out. And the priest goes, oh yeah, we've seen this before, you're healed, welcome back. Maybe 2 men go and the priest goes, wow, there's 2 guys, this is kind of crazy, but welcome back, guys. 10 men go to the priest and go, hey, we just had leprosy and now we're healed. And the priest goes, wait, who sent, where did you come from? How did this happen? And they go, remember that guy Jesus, you heard of him before? Yeah, he told us to come see you, and it was weird because when we left, we had leprosy, and now we're here and we don't. Let's keep reading. Here's what happens. It says, when he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. Okay, these 10 men were cleansed. And here's where the story gets really interesting for you and I. Here's where it begins to apply. Then one of them, not 10 of them, not 8 of them, one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. Now, this is at the point in the story where most of us want to stop and we want to ask the question, wait, why didn't the other 9 go? Wait, where are the other 9? What happened to those guys? Because there was 10, and now only 1 is going back to Jesus. But look at what this guy does, this one guy. Look at what he does in verse 16. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now, he was a Samaritan. He throws himself at the feet of Jesus and begins to say, "Jesus, thank you for what you've done." And Luke reminds us that he wasn't Jewish, but he was a Samaritan. And after this man finishes thanking Jesus, Jesus asks him an incredibly important question in verse 17. In verse 17, Jesus says this. He says, "Then Jesus answered, 'Were there not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except the foreigner?' And he said to them, 'Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well.'" We're not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? And what's interesting about this is as Jesus asked that question, we're not 10 cleansed, he identifies a very real tension that you and I deal with in our relationships with other people and our relationship with God. When he says, "Well, they're not 10 cleansed," he begins to identify this component of gratitude that is at the heart of our relationships. Because what Jesus is doing is he's pointing out when he says, "Well, they're not 10," he's pointing out there's something wrong with this picture. Right? This isn't how it was supposed to be. This isn't how it should be. We're not all 10 cleansed. And when we hear this story for the first time, some of you are hearing this story for the first time, maybe you've heard this story before. When we hear this story, what happens is we immediately begin to think or ask the question, how could those other 9 be so ungrateful? Right? Jesus has literally just given these 10 men their lives back, and 9 of them don't come back. They don't thank Jesus. They never show back up. Jesus has allowed them to go be with their families, to be with their friends, to integrate back into a city that they once lived in. How could they be so self-centered, so ungrateful? But what's ironic is we wouldn't think of this as a story of ingratitude if 1 wouldn't have gone back to Jesus, would we? If 0 of 10 didn't go back to Jesus, we wouldn't think of this as a story of ingratitude. We would just look at this as many of the stories where Jesus healed someone in the New Testament. Because story after story in the New Testament, when we see Jesus healing people, we see Jesus healed them, they went about their way. It doesn't often say, there are circumstances that it does, it doesn't often say that they came back and thanked Jesus. So had the 1 not come back, this isn't a story of ingratitude, this is just another amazing miracle that Jesus does. And really, I don't think that we can blame them, right? I don't think we can blame the 9 for not coming back. Jesus just gave them the opportunity to go be with their family, to go be with their friends, to go back to a city that they haven't been able to be a part of, to talk with people that they haven't seen in a very long time. But because the 1 returned, all of a sudden this becomes a story of ingratitude. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we really believe that the 9 were ungrateful? Do you believe that the 9 who didn't come back were ungrateful? Because I don't necessarily think that way. I believe that if we were, and I'm speculating, but I believe if we were able to track down the 9 at some point and go, "Hey, aren't you grateful for what Jesus did?" They would be like, "Yes, I'm so grateful for Jesus. He gave me my life back. He's done, what he did is unbelievable. I've been telling people about Jesus ever since that happened." They are incredibly grateful, and then yet there's Jesus with the 1 saying, "Weren't there 10? The 9, they're celebrating, they're so grateful, and then there's Jesus with the 1 saying, Where are the other 9? You see, the 9 had no idea that there was an unfinished component to their gratitude. The 9 had the same problem that you and I do. You and I, in many cases, we're just like the 9 because we feel thankfulness in our hearts and we don't express it. They felt it and they didn't express it. They felt grateful and never said a word about it. In your relationships, you feel grateful, right? You tell your coworkers, you tell your friends, hey, my wife's great, I love her so much, she did this is awesome. Ladies, you tell your friends, oh, my husband's so good, he works so hard, yada, 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 whatever it is. As Grant would say, the youths, right? They come in here on Tuesday night and they tell their community group leaders how grateful they are of their parents. Parents, that's a real thing, okay? They actually say those words. We tell other people, but we forget to go back to the person and tell them. Or we just don't say anything at all and we just feel it. I feel grateful. But we have an unfinished component in our gratitude. Because somewhere, I promise you, there's someone that you're in relationship with who's asking the question, weren't there 10? Like, isn't there something wrong with this picture? And it's because unexpressed gratitude communicates ingratitude. Unexpressed gratitude communicates ingratitude. Just like the 9, you and I are so future-oriented that the second something good happens in our life, we're like, bam, yeah, let's move forward, let's keep going, let's do this thing. We got people to see, all these different things, let's go. And we forget to come back and express our gratitude. But the reality is that unexpressed gratitude not only communicates ingratitude, unexpressed gratitude isn't even really gratitude. And here's why. Let me explain this. If you just search the definition of gratitude, jump online, search the definition of gratitude, what you'll find out is there are 2 components to it. The first is feelings of thankfulness. That's where most of us stop. To be grateful is to be thankful and to show appreciation for and return kindness to the other person. There's a second step. There's a second piece of this puzzle. And so let me ask you this as we start to wrap up this morning. Who's coming to your mind right now? There's somebody that's inevitably come to mind right now. Who is that person? Who are the people you feel thankful for, but you haven't expressed it to them, or you haven't expressed it nearly enough? Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, best friend, for being there for me, right? Thanks, husband. Thanks, wife. Thanks, boss. Grant, you got that? Thanks. Thanks for being there for me. Thanks for loving me. Thanks for caring for me. Thanks for encouraging me. Thanks for working so hard. Thanks for all you do. I mentioned earlier that unexpressed gratitude has a missing component to it. So unexpressed gratitude has this missing component, and what expressed gratitude does is it closes that loop in our lives in gratitude. It closes the loop. That's what expressed gratitude does. It closes up that loop. Let me illustrate it this way for you. My son Banks, he turns 3 this week, okay? So we're gonna have a 3-year-old birthday party at our house. How many of you guys have been to a 3-year-old birthday party before, right? Those are awesome. Okay, so it's going to be just like any normal 3-year-old birthday party, I would say. There's going to be presents, there's going to be cake, there's going to be chaos. It'll be a good time. But if you've ever been to a little kid's birthday party, or you have little kids, or you've been around little kids at Christmas time, the same thing happens at this point in the day. And at the point where Banks begins to open presents is when it gets really crazy. And my son Banks is really into superheroes right now. That's like his thing. And so inevitably, he's going to get superhero action figures for his birthday. What's going to happen is he's going to rip the first one open, and all he's going to do is get fixated on this one action figure he has in his hands in this moment, okay? No longer does anything else in the room matter besides this one guy that's in a package that he can't get out, okay? And so he's just going to lose his mind and say, Dad, open this, come on, please open this. And in that moment, my wife Sierra and I, we have to kind of try and focus him a little bit because, and parents, you know this, because there's other things that need to take place, okay? First, there's a pile of presents here, which what I realized last service is let's just buy kids one present because that's all they really need, and that's all they get excited about. Everything else doesn't matter. But there's this other piece, is that as he rips it open and all he wants to do is just go play with it and be done, that as parents, we do something. As parents, there's these 4 words that we say, and that we're like, hey, come back here, and we begin to say this. What do you say? 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 Hey, tell them, what do you say? What do you say? And they have this present, and they're so excited. What do you say? What do you need to say? Right? And it gets a little awkward for the gift giver at that point, because they're like, just tell me thank you, kid, and this will be over. Like, we'll move forward. What do you say? What do you say? And then eventually, our kids, my son Banks, will say thank you, and we're like, next present. Why do we do that? Because as parents, we recognize that the loop hasn't been closed, don't we? We recognize that there's still something that has to be done to close that loop of gratitude in our kids' lives. I heard Andy Stanley, he's a pastor and he's an author. I heard him say it this way. He said, when we refuse to pay our debts of gratitude, we choose to live with an inflated view of ourselves. That's not who we are, is it? That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. That's not who you are. That's not who you want to be. We desire to be like the one, don't we? We desire to be like the one who came back and said, Jesus, thank you so much. The one who comes back to the relationships we have and says, thank you. I want to be the kind of person who's willing to go back and say thank you to the people who enabled me to move forward. And I would say the same is probably true for you.